Pop in, say hi. If you've never come into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And this is my first of my two live shows. This is a show that I've had for, oh my goodness, it's got to be eight, maybe 9 years. I know I started coming live consistently about, you know what? I'm going to say 8 years. I'm going to say 8 years. It wasn't as long as maybe as I thought because, I don't think that I started coming live and start until I started doing that experimentation. I was really in a mode of trying everything I possibly could to keep my brand going. Right? I wanted to be a YouTube superstar. And after a while of being on YouTube and in actually enjoying the process and following my progress, that, I felt like I really had something to contribute, but I wasn't quite sure what. All I knew is I wanted to be on YouTube, and I was doing urban exploration at the time. I was exploring abandoned farms, abandoned houses, going back to, oh my goodness, fur traders of the late 18th century. And it was really interesting. And I think, having that passion and actually seeing progress in what you're trying to create, because that's what I was doing. I was creating a brand by sharing an experience of mine. So curious. I wasn't the only urban exploration out there. There are lots of urban explorers out there. Hello, Owen, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do follow the urban explorers because this is how a lot of us got to meet, right? And for myself, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity just not to be a spectator on YouTube because I was just as much because I loved urban exploration. And, when I was out on the road, I recognized that even though I wasn't doing the great big mansions and the chateaus and the real dangerous things like because it was a young adults kind of hobby, and it was a good way to start on YouTube. And when you are that person who kind of has that adventurous spirit and not afraid, and you have a little bit of courage and a little bit of desire maybe to be a YouTube superstar, it is a lot of fun. And but it is a hobby, it is a passion, it's something I still love to do. I came across abandoned even on this trip, but I didn't want to repeat an explore that I've done before, even though it is in that repeat that we get better at what we do. And possibly, people who didn't watch the last time I explored that, maybe they didn't finish watching that video because I was a very good filmer in that, right? So I believe I could have stopped and I could have re-explored because, oh my goodness, I could not believe how bad a state that one explorer. It was the motel on the highway. If you get an opportunity to go into my explorers and find that one, it shouldn't be too far back there in my videos, right? Not my lives, but in my videos. But I couldn't believe the state that it was in, just even after only a couple of years ago that I filmed that, right? But that's change, right? That's consistently change, and it's the change isn't just for people and animals and right the environment. It's right that is part of our environment. And this is why I like to document these things. This is why I like documenting the urban exploration, because a lot of these houses and buildings, what there were one room schoolhouses, there were old churches, one room churches, there were abandoned homesteads, like abandoned log homesteads. And all of these buildings are probably on the ground now, the ones that I explored. Now there's a fresh batch, right? Because, when it comes to agriculture, old farms are constantly being amalgamated into larger farming situations. And, they're not necessarily having that property because of the house, right? And they probably have no interest in it at all. It's what kind of crops can they get off the land, right? And so a lot of these houses, they're right. It's a new generation of abandoned homes, but there's lots of abandoned homes out there. But mine weren't mansions, like I said, or chateaus or castles or anything like that. They were, right, people's homes. And, you know, that was probably, right, I wasn't woke to any of the ideas that I had, but I was kind of being led into it, wasn't I? Because a lot of what I'm doing now is specifically the result and the extension of what I was doing back then, right? And so, in learning the process and just trusting the process and getting a few lessons and understand it's in the repeat and it's in making mistakes and course correcting in those make mistakes and finding better ways and letting yourself move along with evolution, even though it seems that it's just kind of too much for you. But it's only too much for you because you don't know it, and you don't know it until you know it, right? Uh, Andrew would be a good example for that because his job is social, but it's also AI, right? It's helped by the AI, the digital age, that there are new innovations and new programs and always things to learn. But if you just let go, and we grumble and complain, right? Because we're like what my mom was with the remote control with the television. She would much rather, even with her 12 different kinds of rheumatoid arthritis, she would much prefer to get her butt off the chair and walk to the TV and manually change the channel, stand there for a minute, decide whether or not this was the show she wanted. She didn't, she just change it. And she'd stand there for a half an hour before she would just even touch a button on a remote control. You could not pull my mother into the digital age. She was not interested in it in any way, right? But my dad loved technology. Oh my goodness. I was just saying this week in one of my live shows that, he loved those great big Pioneer 6 foot high speakers, right? With the bass and all those amps with all the buttons and lights, and he loved it all. Oh, and his great big earmuffs, right? Because his headphones. Oh my goodness. My dad, when Nintendo came out, his Nintendo would be worth absolutely a fortune because he was one of the very first people in Vancouver. We're from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba at this moment. But change always comes, and who's to say? I've lived in a few provinces now, and I've explored almost all of them. At the very least, I think I've almost stepped foot in all of them, and a lot of the states too. But I have only, as an adult, been to North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, right? Um, but as a child, we went to all of those, right? My dad loved road tripping, right? We did Route 66 so many times, and I remember so little about it. And that's the truth. But there are some things on those trips that just kind of pop into my mind, like the big arch in Cincinnati. So I remember being in Cincinnati. I remember seeing the mountains with the presidents on it. So whatever state that is in, I remember, well, Reno, Nevada. I know Nevada. I remember Mount Shasta because my dad's car broke down at the top of Mount Shasta. And we had to go and into the bush and we had to find snow in the middle of summer. And there was snow in the middle of summer because his radiator dried up and he had no water for his radiator, so he had to melt snow and stuff. And I remember certain experiences in my life of being out on the road and being in lots of different states. I don't think we ever did the East Coast as my dad's family. As an adult, me and my husband, we did the East Coast as kind of a an engagement trip so that I could meet all his family because that's my husband was from the East Coast, but and I was so surprised that a lot of people on the East Coast, there's lots of communities, they don't even speak English, they speak French, right? I didn't know. I thought they just spoke French in Quebec, right? But no, there are other communities in Canada that just speak French. Even here in Winnipeg and St. Boniface are now assimilated, they're amalgamated, right? But there was a time that, St. Boniface was for the French, and then on the other side of the river was for the English, right? And it's so wonderful to look out at the world and see, right, that it takes somebody to take the first step, right? That here in Canada, that we become the example for other countries that it can be done because we are such a mishmash of different cultures, different religious ideas, different political ideas, and somehow we make it work. We're still a traumatized country because we're brand new. So anybody, right? It's epigenetics, right? It's our grandparents and our great grandparents who made those scary decisions to up their families in Europe and in Asia and come here to Canada. And it's just, and it takes a couple of generations for the systems to calm down, right? For new ideas and new acceptances of new cultures and taking on new cultural ideas for yourself, right? Even for myself, I take on ideas that are just not the norm, right? Just not the norm for my own upbringing and in my own environment and being an adult. And I've worn many different shoes in my life, right? From from all different levels. I don't like, this is why I stalled here. It's just I'm trying to find the right word for it because it's almost in that idea of casting, right? But it's just our environments. And, you hear me say lots of times that we're all in the same storm. We're just, right? We're just riding on different rafts. Some of us on logs, some of us on fishing boats, some of us are with the Coast Guard, some of us are dancing on cruise ships. So that feeling of discomfort and difficulty is going to feel different in each one of our systems, right? But it's going to take a few generations, and I think just now that we are starting to actually be uh, qualified. It's not qualified, experienced, right? Settled enough, calmed down enough in our systems as a whole that we can, right, better find ways of getting along with ourselves and being that example for others, right? That how it can be how it can be done. Yeah, it's one thing that's pretty magnificent. I saw a post online, oh, it was a few years ago, but it stuck with me. And it was children of the 70s in a class with minorities in the class, and how we treated the minorities, not somebody better or worse than anyone, but just somebody who was different and not part of the majority. And then they showed a high school class of kids that were from the 80s or 90s, early 90s. And again, they were a mishmash. But even though there were minorities, as a minority, it made a majority. Do you know what I mean? Like two Chinese people and two East Indian people. Like in the whole, it made more than say the Caucasians, and right. So the minority had become the majority, and it's such an acceptance now of each other's cultures, right? Might not be an acceptance of people's religious ideas yet, right? But I think we are more tolerant of other people's religious ideas, political ideas. While we can see that we still have that aggression in us, because we're really in each other's face with having our side heard, right? Our side seen. And some people, right, again, because of that idea of the storm, it's easier and more comfortable for some than it is to other to butt heads with that, right? But the minority will always hold the majority accountable, if nothing else, in their grumbling and complaining, right? But we don't want to become the majority of grumbler and complainers, right? Like we don't all want to be grumbler and complainers, because then that's all we're going to be, is grumbler and complainers. At least can we have a little action in that, right? Okay, let me pop in and see who's here. Um, The churches, you like the churches, eh, William? Yeah, I keep saying I got to go into that footage. I don't have all that footage anymore, but I can download it from YouTube and repurpose it, and maybe being a little bit better editor, not a good editor, but a little bit better editor than some of those very first videos that I did. Maybe we could put something together. But remember, way back then, and it wasn't that long ago, you guys. I've been on YouTube for 11 years. So in the long scheme of things, that really isn't that long. But I remember the footage that we were taking at that point, that it wasn't high definition. It wasn't 4,000 or 4K or 8K or 5K, even not even 1080p. Like it was just horrible footage. And I have looked at those explorers here and there, and I'm glad I have them documented, because otherwise, like I said, they're all on the ground now, right? That they've all fallen because they were just so old. They weren't, right? Houses, unless they were made of concrete, were not meant to last forever, right? That's why it's so hard sometimes to find, the indigenous villages, and that's probably a good thing, right? That we're not finding those indigenous villages in the deserts and stuff in the southern part of the United States. They're able to preserve things are preserved because it's just so dry. But anything further north than that, it's the moisture gets to it, things decay and rot, and finally there's no impression. I watch a metal detecting channel. um well, he has two of them. He has Stealth Diggers, and then he wanted to add another channel, but because he usually posted on Thursdays on Stealth Diggers, he named his second one Not Thursdays to say it was another channel, but it's not your regular Thursday show. So uh but he looks for those colonial homes, right? He has a small crew, great guys, and they metal detect, and they get so excited buy a pair of coverall pins, or even pieces of lanterns and stuff like that, because for them it's about the history. It's right. They're not looking. It's exciting when they find the coins and the tokens and the jewelry and the right. But they get just as excited about a 1964 silver diamond as they do, as something really, really spectacular. I wish they would do more of the dump digging. They do dump digs every once in a while because they have that opportunity, because they know where these home sites are, but because they love metal detecting, that's their passion, right? That's what they offer up. And yeah, but these homes, no imprints at all. They just have to go into the woods, turn on their metal detectors, and just start metal detecting the ground, because they have no idea where these home sites are. And they have rock lines. These properties are rock lined too, so they know there are homesteads in there. But because they harvest wood, right? Trees for lumber and stuff. That a lot of these old homesteads get pushed aside, and again, because they were just old wood homesteads, right? The wet, and they eventually fall, and sometimes there's no indication at all that there was a homestead there. Sometimes there's a pile of rocks to say, okay, that used to maybe be a fireplace, right? Or they see a hole in the ground and they go, oh, well, maybe there was a house in there. And then they'll take their metal detector to see if they can pick up the nails and stuff, right? But it's also really hard because they were the colonials, right? They were the very first Americans. I don't know why I love, right? I love the Civil War. I love the American metal detectorists and the bottle diggers. I even watch Jamestown Discovery. Andrew, did you check out that channel that I said to check out? Jamestown Discovery. They just posted something else. Oh, they're opening the ground again. Something that was excavated 50 years or 60 years ago, but they think they didn't do a good job, so they want to go in and redo it again, because they just filled it in with the old rubble. But a lot of the old rubble was made up of pieces from even older, right, old buildings and churches and wells and stuff. So yeah, Jamestown Discovery. Now those were the very first uh, uh, settlers, right, in North America. Well, they say it was the Normans, that they say it was actually the Vikings, right? That settled up in Labrador. Is it Labrador? I think it was Labrador or Iceland, maybe Nova Scotia. I don't know. Somewhere's along the east coast of Canada. And then they find there's settlements down the eastern coast of the states too. So they think they kind of migrated, but they don't know how they got there, right? They still don't know how they got there, but they know actually the Vikings were on the east coast of Canada only because they found their stone dwellings, right? Not wood dwellings that something may have rotted, and right, they used great big boulders and rocks at that time. Really interesting. I was thinking today, you know, if I were to have it all over again, that there is no question that I would have been the best student ever. I would be going for bursaries and sponsorships from other universities and college. I would have found a way, and I would have stayed in my love for archaeology, knowing that it would have led to my real passion, which is anthropology, right? Social anthropology, right? With a degree in archaeology, because I would be wanting to study ancient community, right? And old settlements and way of thinking and different mythologies, different religious ideas, right? I'd like to know, right? Going way, we'll go past Egypt, and let's just go back even past the Neanderthals and Homo erectus and Homo naledi and all those other different species of humans, because, right? We were just the only ones who survived, right? The Homo sapiens were the only one survived, and definitely I would have to say God had a hand in that one, right? But I think it was just a new start, a new beginning, and Earth has been going through that process for so long. How many times have we we haven't destroyed ourselves, right? As a modern civilization, we're still here, but meteorites have hit the earth. I mean, like, how did all the dinosaurs die? How did they all die off? Right? They were just too big to survive in a time that had been minimalized almost to nothing, right? So unless you could live on pretty much nothing, you wouldn't have survived, right? Humans survived. How they survived? Grateful, grateful that they survived, because I would hate to think that we would have to start off as one-celled amoebas all over again. Just using that as an analogy, but just saying, right? We have come a long way. Hello, Owen and Andrew and William. Eugene, hi. Hello, how are you doing tonight? Good evening, everybody. I am doing good tonight. I subscribed to your channel, gave you a thumbs up today. Thank you, Eugene. I appreciate that. If everybody follows suit with Eugene and gives me a thumbs up, that would be pretty. That would pretty be awesome. My brand could use it. But I am all just happy that you guys are here to hang out with me. Yeah, but right, social anthropologist. That would be my soul's passion in some way. So I believe it was ignited in me, but because of my own choices and my dynamic upbringing, right? That I made choices that didn't take me in that direction in any way, right? I did not follow my I followed passions, but those momentary, right? Caught my eye. That's an idea. Oh, we should do this. And right? And just living day to day. And that's what I did for the most part of my life. I didn't consider it survival in any way. That was just my day to day because that was my environment. That was all that my environment was asking of me, was just to survive, right? It wasn't asking me to pursue my dreams and chase down my goals, to be that YouTube superstar, right? That came so much later, right? Lots of times we can kick ourselves in the butt for the things that we didn't get done, but I'm saying better than late than never. I'm grateful for the insights that come to me, right? If they come to me, you know, 50 years later, right? Or they come 60 years later, it doesn't, right? They came. That's what I'm so grateful for, because lots of people, they just wake up every day and they're just on repeat, right? But if we're going to be on repeat, we should be in repeat in the things that we love, right? And delve deep and be willing to be pulled into it, right? I think this is all that God is asking us, right? Just to be open to change, be open, because we can see it even in our own lifetime, right? In that childish kind of saying that goes from one generation to the next generation. Oh, they're just the old fogies. That's the way it was in the old days. But that's because it's true, because we're always changing. And, we have to allow ourselves to be pulled into that, because if we don't, then we're just going to isolate and possibly become extinct in that, right? What do you call that? Irrelevant. And whatever's not relevant, whatever is not adding something, right? I don't believe that there's an opportunity, because there is no growth, only standstill. But if you think like me, right? Next time around, you'll find yourself right back in the same spot. And then you'll get another opportunity to make a different choice, maybe, right? So this is why I plant some of these things in my mind about, like, wanting to be a social anthropologist. I think this is a good route, no matter where we are in the world, in the history of the world. That's a good place to sit, right? Because at the very least, you have answers for yourself, and anything, right, that I can compound now, it might offer up another opportunity, stronger, right, with better odds of showing up in my life. And maybe I'll actually get to experience, right, some of my real passions. I'm grateful, right? I get to do lots of fun things. I just got through downloading all the footage from my next. It's going to be a long video, guys. It's going to be so long. I'm going to try and cut a segment out and turn that into a walk with me, Cindy Jean video for my playlist. Maybe that will help a little bit. It'll take at least 20 minutes out of the main video, so that's an option. I was thinking about it as I was downloading it. Right now, I'm in the process of converting it all. Once it's all converted, tomorrow I'll get up. I'm going to try and get it all converted tonight, but for sure tomorrow we are going to start editing it, so that Wednesday, right, like I promised, I'll have a next episode. And Silver Falls, right? Dog Lake. It was, right? It was Silver Falls, but it was Silver Falls Provincial Park, but we were sitting at Dog Lake. I think the lake that I stayed at my campsite was called Dog Lake, and it was really quite beautiful. It could have easily called Dog Lake Campground or Dog Lake Provincial Park, right? But Silver Falls, yeah, was only a 5-minute drive, so it makes sense that it's Silver Falls. But in any case, right, we're working on that next segment. Did anybody go and watch that video? I know Owen did because he sent me a beautiful comment. Just absolutely. I loved that. I pinned it. I just thought it was amazing. At very least, go in and watch my first episode, Blue Lake Provincial Park. Just go into my main channel, into my videos. It should be one of the first ones suggested to you. If you don't know, I did 8 days in Ontario. I did 4 different provincial parks this year, and I filmed it, and I took all you guys along with me. The first episode was an hour long, Blue Lake. So you can imagine how long 3 days at Silver Falls, how much footage I have, but I'll hack away at it, and hopefully, right, it's just a lot of splicing it together. It's all in order. So, hopefully not too much editing, right? And then you put your title and your music in, and this is why I pick the same music for every season. I pick a tune, and that's the music for every single episode. I only have 4 episodes, maybe 5 if I do the walk with me video, which I'm sure I'm pretty gonna have to do it. Because there's still a ton of footage, you guys, tons. But it's good practice for me to edit, right? It's good practice for me. I have a kind of a creative mind in the way I'd like to put things together, but technically I'm not all there yet. The first opportunity I get to hire me an editor, that's exactly what I'll do, right? And I'll get myself the best camera that I can on the market, and I'm going to just film and send my footage to my editor and let them edit my video. And somebody else watching the footage is not going to have the attachment that I have to it. A lot of it, I say, well, I don't know what's important because I want my videos to be important, but I want them to be informative. I want them to be enjoyable and peaceful and right. I want the whole package in that. But because I'm not technically inclined, my videos can get pretty long. I have no idea how long the next video might even be 2 hours long. It's a big one, you guys. So hack the way best you can. Come in, take a look at the beginning. Maybe I'll put some timestamps in there just to show you where there might be some interesting things that you guys might want to see. But other than that, right, it is what it is. And it is in that practice and it is in that repetitiveness of just working away that we get better and better, right? Just like when I started and it was like 320p that we were filming in, 420 if you were really lucky, right? I had a camcorder. It could do high definition. I could zoom in and stuff. And oh my goodness, that almost killed my computer when I tried to edit that, right? But I was not inclined that way. I did the very best that I could. But look at, I'm still here, right? After all that change, after all that failure at not wanting to go back to some of those videos and rehashing them because they were so bad, there's still documentation, like really good documentation, because I don't think too many people have footage of some of those really, really, really old, right? I had tongue and groove log homesteads on my explorers, and if you've never seen any of those videos, go in, right, watch some of my ghost towns, watch some of my one school one room school rooms, or the churches, the abandoned churches. I came across some of the most beautiful, beautiful abandoned churches, right? And some of them weren't even abandoned. Some of those churches are still sitting in farm fields and stuff, but the communities have kept them going. I even explored one out in the middle of a highway. There's the church, which used to be part of a ghost town, and it was the last building, and they kept the building because of the graveyard. But it was the meridian. It was the middle of the highway, and there was one highway going this way, and the same highway going that way, in and out of the states, right? And then this little abandoned church sitting right in the middle. And it was just a farmer. Every once in a while, he'd get a donation or something, and right, they'd send it off, and they do a little repair on the church. I hope that church is doing okay, right? It deserves to be preserved 100%. It was, yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember the name of that church. It's been a while since I've been into some of those explore videos, but I'm so busy because I'm always moving forward. I'm not allowing myself to stick into the past, right? Once that past is done, once it's resolved, once I've got the information that I need, right? The experience that I need, even if it's just in the repetitiveness of doing it over and over and over again, and allowing myself to be pulled into something different, something better, something more relevant for right now. And then right now will be the past, right? As soon as my live show is over, right? It'll be over. Okay, let me have a sip of my coffee here. Mm, I got such a beautiful. I'm that person who's a connoisseur of coffee. Like, there are some brands that I will touch with a 10-foot pole, right? Right. If I was starving and there was no coffee in the world, maybe. But I love good coffee. But coffee is so expensive right now, especially with the tariffs going on. They're hitting like $40 for, one of those tins of coffee like this. $40 up here in Canada. So when they go on sale, right, I've been trying to pick them up every time they go on sale. And that's how I've been, right, managing to keep coffee in the cupboard. Otherwise, it would just be, I would never spend $40 on a tin of coffee, like I said, right? Unless I didn't have any other choices. And I probably $40 would go a long way. And if it's the cost issue, then I would give up. I would give up the coffee, right? And switch to tea bags. You can still get tea bags fairly inexpensive. But yeah, those tariffs are killing everybody, right? And actually, a lot of people in the states are going to stop buying Canadian completely because when it came to eBay, especially my sister, she loves shipping into the states and stuff through her eBay channel, but she can't do it because people are paying more money for having their items shipped in than what they paid for it. Excuse me. I made a goulash for supper. It was supposed to be curried meatballs and rice, but then I didn't recognize that I didn't have any curry left, so it ended up being a goulash. And I didn't know how it was going to turn out. It didn't look very appetizing in the end, but kind of threw a whole bunch of mishmash of things that I do like into it and just hoped that it worked. And it worked out beautifully. It was actually quite delicious. Yeah, so it just strange, right? I didn't check to see. I've been having a craving this week for curry. I really like curry. I try to have curry at least once or twice a month, and homemade. right? I don't buy the jars of the curry. I just like to use the curry powder and just make my own curry. But I make good curry, right? Lots of people don't like curry. Do any of you guys like curry? Yeah. Um, Andrew says, my job is a mix of personal and strictly controlled contexts. I interview people, but it has to be done according to precise rules. I was taught GIT, general interviewing uh, techniques, but you do a lot of it on the computers and stuff, right? You have to be pulled into AI learning, right? Because I have no idea what a GIT, general interviewing technique is, but maybe that's just something you do on the phone, which would be a hard job, especially. Do you cold call, Andrew? Do you cold call? Ugh, I can't cold call. That's not something that's in my makeup in any way. Uh, which is surprising, especially when I hang with the entrepreneurs, and sometimes cold calling is a necessity, right? That's how you drum up your customers and stuff. But yeah, cold calling is just not my thing. Uh, Andrew says, my family made many trips between wherever we lived and our family farm in Indiana that I came to recognize certain houses along the way. I didn't know you lived on a farm, Andrew. I don't recall you ever mentioning that you lived in a farm, right? Oh my goodness. We lived on a farm too. We only lived on the farm for 6 months. It was an experience. It was a crazy experience for my entire family. I do remember we weren't there for very long, but there were lots of memories made in that homestead. In the end, it served well. My dad sold a property that he bought for $14,000, and he sold it for $365,000 6 months later. That's kind of crazy. I have to say that he pretty much blew all that money in 6 months, also. My dad was a compulsive gambler, and I remember when he sold that farm, my dad took us down to Nevada to live down to live down in Nevada for a few months. And I remember when we moved back to Vancouver, um, that yeah, they wanted us girls to repeat our grade in school, because he took us out of school a few months earlier so that we could uh, live in, what was it, maybe Reno. I think maybe we lived in Reno, maybe Vegas. I'm not quite sure if it was Reno or Vegas. I think it was Reno because I remember a swimming pool on that trip. That was at the Flamingo Hotel, right? Motel, not hotel. Flamingo Motel. Yeah, but really interesting. But I never knew that you lived on a farm, Andrew, and I've known you for a long time, but I didn't know you lived. Did you enjoy living on the farm, or was it an experience, right? Like, it was a crazy. I remember so many of my life experiences, scary ones, difficult ones, fun ones, adventurous ones, right? I remember lots of them, and it was when we were living on that farm, and to think that we only lived on that farm for 6 months, that was a crazy experience. Wasn't even insulated, you guys. You could see outside by like this much in between the slats of the boards of the house, where I think there might have been like what do you call that, um, chink, when you you stuff in between the logs and stuff and the boards with plaster and stuff. I think it had that at one time, but it had all fallen out. The place hadn't been lived in decades. Yeah. But he didn't care. He just wanted the land, right? Because he got a tip by some government official who got into his cab, because in between commercial fishermen, my dad was a cab driver, and he got into a cab, and this big honcho says, "Go buy land north on the Alaska Highway because they're building the Alaska pipeline." And within 2 weeks we were on the road, and he bought an old farm that was off the highway, and it was about half an hour out of the town of Dawson Creek in British Columbia. So yeah, we lived there for 6 months, but it was funny in those 6 months that my dad made $300,000, more than $300,000 profit off of that farm. And it turned out they didn't even use that property to build the Alaska pipeline. They used the other side of the highway, but they bought up everything anyway. They wanted to own everything anyway. But he did really, really well in that. But these are the little circumstances and and I'd say blessings, right? That come into your life. That guy coming into my dad's cab and saying, "I'm going to give you a tip," and gave him that amazing tip that he probably could have gotten into a lot of trouble for, right? Yeah. Um, Andrew says, William, things have slowed down at my workplace, and I'm glad I have been needing a rest. Are you feeling okay, Andrew? I find that a lot of people in my life are needing rest. Even me, I felt that need to rest, that need to slow down. But I have been trying to kick myself in the bum here and there where I can, because I want to be accountable and I want to be the example to others, right? And so yeah, even today, to say, "Oh, Cindy, right, got to get the next video underway." And what I'm doing now in that part of editing video is probably the hardest part, right? Because you have to make sure all the frames are set up properly and how you want to put them into the video, that everything has a codec, and right, that it is suitable to be uh, edited, right? In the Blue Lake, I had about 25 minutes of video that I had done a little bit of experimenting in and using different features, and I couldn't edit it. It was just not possible. And it was good footage too, right? Sunrises and sunsets and seagulls and walks on paths, right? Some trail walks. So I'm optimistic that the rest of the footage is, I think I probably used some of those features. I just hope that it's not going to ruin any more of the video, or I can find a solution where it can properly edit those clips, right? Yeah. But right, we learn these things as we go. Okay. Oh, you like my videos, Eugene? You've been watching my adventure videos? Yeah, I'll be posting another one on Wednesday. So keep your eyes open on Wednesday. I'll be posting another one. Uh, Andrew says, Cindy, I'm reminded of how in the World War I in England, photographs were taken from airplanes and unintentionally showed the outlines of old castles and houses and even the remains of Roman structures. Right? Yeah, it's important to talk. When we talk about photographs in this generation that we're living right now, we don't have photographs. Everything is online. Everything is up in the clouds, right? We don't have like oh. We don't have like videos. Nobody keeps photographs like this anymore, right? And this is documentation. Now, if this digital age were to crash, if AI learning, if something just kind of glitched and it was zero, what would we have for the past 20 years? Like, nobody has properly documented physically, I don't think. The only thing that I can say is through creativity and artistry, right? The painters and the artists, and they're documenting, and so I'm optimistic that their work will survive the test of time, right? That will be enough, but because otherwise we're just going to be a blank spot in the evolutionary process. So well, they'll say, well, like, what happened in the the 2000s? Like, there is no trace of human activity. What did the, right? But then we have our concrete buildings, but there really isn't any true concrete buildings except maybe some dams that are current and new, right? All the buildings that are being built now are not going to stand the test of time because there's steel rods and there's plaster and there is composite. And even though these things are last a long time, they're not going to last forever, not like stone and concrete do. So I'm really hoping that there is some trace of us somewheres down the line, right? I am grateful to be here on YouTube, and I hope YouTube is here forever, right? That, maybe somewheres down the line in another lifetime in another human, right, that I'll pop in to say Cindy's channel here and sit in with us and be, oh my goodness, really, that's what it is, and be able to make a little bit of movement for themselves, right? And that's the best thing about being a YouTube creator, because this is, right, this is here forever, you guys, right? Maybe not ever, never, never. There are no guarantees in anything, but as it is now, right, it's just as good a shot as anything else that's going on out there. um Oh yeah, it's called Jamestown Discovery is the name of the channel. If you want to write that down. I know, Andrew, you'll find it to be a really, really interesting. You'll find it super interesting. It's just as interesting as the urban exploration, and you get to see real artifacts being dug out of the ground. Like when they pulled that saber out of the ground, like that was absolutely incredible, and they got it, that one, out of a well. But they've gotten tons of artifacts out of privies out of like old toilets and stuff. And lots of times, like I said, they tear old buildings down and then use the debris of the old buildings to use as foundations for the new buildings, right? And again, and especially, when you go as far back as you do in history, right? I think you would find it absolutely fascinating. Oh my goodness, and here's one, you guys. I don't know if you guys heard about it, and I'm not going to have the island's name down pat. I don't even have the island's name at all, but you can Google it. Lost, lost. Oh, I can't get Lost Colony. Google the Lost Colony and pull up the most recent post. When you filter it, most recent post, and you'll see they found the lost colony, you guys. It was on the island that they had marked on the tree, and they had amalgamated and assimilated to their environment, because even though there were indigenous artifacts and stuff found at the same time, it was the pottery, it was the tools, because already they were blacksmithing and stuff at the time. It was the fire pit and the processes that weren't existent in North America yet, so they had to have been brought over. But when they did the time span and everything, yeah, it turned out to be the lost colony nonetheless. Oh, I wish I could remember um, the name of the colony. Maybe Andrew can help me out with that. But yeah, super interesting. They have been excavating it for quite a while now, because it seems that it's been spread out on the island quite a bit. So I guess they were farming and settling it. And the thing is, when those ships came back, uh, they saw the name of the island on the tree, but when they went to get them on the island, and they always said, "Oh, they were lost." They Right, because it's easier to say that than to say we left them behind. But a big storm swept in, and they made the executive decision to head back to England, right? To head home without even checking out the island and checking to see if the colonists were really there. So they weren't very diligent in that, because it turns out that yes, they were there. So it's not just Jamestown now that these amazing excavations are going on, right? The lost colony to the island Giuseppe. Oh, I can't remember the name. I should be a little bit more knowledgeable, but the idea is just to know enough to come into the conversation or to start the conversation, right? And it is something I've only been following now for a couple of months, but there's a lot going on since they started posting their findings and stuff. So that's a pretty exciting, lots of exciting stuff going on when it comes to archaeology, you guys, right? Tons. Even how long humans have been in North America, like Homo sapiens have been in North America. Yeah, there's actually um, uh, Clovis um, arrowheads and stuff further north than what they thought it possibly could even have made it. So they're thinking, like, you know, that maybe man had been as close as Michigan, or even a little bit more northern than that, right? That maybe in that migration, that maybe people stayed, Maybe the habitat was livable, maybe not comfortable, but it was livable in any case. And they're finding so much because the glaciers now are melting. So they're finding evidence in the glaciers now. So yeah, lots of interesting things going on when it comes to archaeology and history. But yeah, Andrew, check out that channel, Jamestown Discovery, it's called. Um, Andrew's never had curry before? Wow, never had curry in your whole life? You've never had. Interesting. I mean, that's interesting. It does not like makes you a weirdo or anything like that. But I guess a lot of people don't like curry. I don't even know where I learned to enjoy curry. Um, the first time I actually went to a Indian restaurant, this is actually an interesting story. Um, I lived in Winnipeg and I was a young adult. And it was probably one of my very first apartments. And I think my father had just passed away. And my sister lived in Saskatchewan, and she asked if I could house somebody she knew up until a couple of weeks ago because I asked about her again because I thought, oh, that would make a good story somewheres down the line, right? But a couple of weeks ago, I talked to my sister because I couldn't remember his name. I couldn't even remember his name. He was a Vietnamese young man. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, and he was a student citizen. Like he came to Canada to be a student. He wanted to be a brain surgeon. He wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And my sister messaged me, or not messaged me, she phoned me, right? We didn't have texts and stuff then at that time. So that was probably in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s. And she says, can you allow, his name turned out to be Cam. Can you allow Cam to stay with you for a few days because the embassy that he had to go through was in Winnipeg, where I lived, right? And he only had a short window to get his application and his documents in, but he had nowheres to stay and he only had a small amount of money. And my sister helped him to get to Winnipeg, and I allowed him to stay with me, a total stranger, right? Turned out my sister didn't even know him. When I asked her about him, if she remembered his name, she remembered his name, but she said he wasn't a friend. She didn't know him, right? She was just helping him out, just somebody that she decided to help out. Well, he stayed with me for a couple of weeks while he was getting his application in order and getting paperwork and all the documents that he needed in order. And then as a thank you gift, he asked me, what would you like? I says, I don't need anything. I'm good. And he says, I'd like to do some. He was poor too. He didn't have any money either, but he really was adamant that he wanted to do something nice for me, right? And I says, well, why don't we go out for dinner, right? I was a big girl. I didn't get to go out on dates, and it kind of felt like a date. And I says, well, let's go out for dinner. And he says, okay, where do you want to go? Well, let's try something new because for me, it's all about the experience. I want it to be a memory, right? So I'd never tried East Indian food, and I knew where there was an East Indian restaurant, and I said, well, let's try East Indian. And he took me out for dinner, and I enjoyed every dish, but every dish looked exactly the same except a different color. And lots of bread, and I guess you eat everything with the bread. You dip it in with the bread and stuff. But I loved it so much that I think that was the first time that I tried curry. That after a while I started to make my own curry because, well, can't afford to go to restaurants all the time, right? I've never been a big I like restaurants, right? But restaurants are not something that's on the agenda very often because they are pricey. They're an experience, but they're pricey. So so it's really neat when I'm telling that story because I was just talking to my sister about it because I thought it was a good story. But the best part of that story was that about 10 years later, I let's not get ahead of myself. When he left, I wanted to give him a gift, right? But I wasn't rich. I didn't have a lot of stuff, but I had some of my dad's books, right? And one of those books was The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And it's philosophy, but it's done in poetry, right? And and I gave him that book as inspiration and motivation. So funny that even back then, not woke to any of these ideas, I was that person, right? But I gave him that book, and I never heard or saw him again. I never heard or saw him again. 10 years later, it was at least 10 years later, I got a parcel in the mail, and it was from his mother, and she was returning the book. I don't know if she felt it was against her religion because they were Vietnamese, so they believed in Buddha, or right, um, right, and these were Middle Eastern ideas. And I don't know why. She didn't explain to why she was returning the book. But she returned the book to me. It was in the brown paper with my address, and I wasn't even living in the same place. So she tracked me down somehow, probably through Facebook, right? Even then, I wasn't technically inclined and didn't understand my information was plastered all over the place like that on Facebook. But she found me somehow, and she returned the book, and she said, uh, Cam wanted me to thank you and we have this book returned to you and to let you know that his dreams came true and he got to be a neurosurgeon. Isn't that amazing? That in a way, me and my sister Tracy possibly might have played a role in people's lives being changed, right? We didn't operate on anybody's brains, right? He did all the work himself, being the neurosurgeon. But in our contribution, me and my sister's Tracy's contribution, that might not have, and there seemed to have been a very good chance that that wouldn't have happened because he was so desperate, right? That would not have happened if me and my sister hadn't stepped in. And then to find out last week when I talked to her about it that she wasn't even friends with him, and I think I agreed because I thought he was a friend of hers, right? But yeah, it was interesting story. Anyway, I'm just gonna come down here, but this is what our choices do, right? They create change. I could have said no, right? Or my sister, when he asked if she knew anyone that she, right, I can't be bothered, and she could have just said sorry, right, and just made something up, but she didn't. And because we said yes, and because we involved ourselves in his life a little bit, right? That possibly we could have been a part of some kind of magical, maybe the person who was supposed to cure cancer, right? You hear those stories sometimes that people don't chase their dreams down, right? That people don't achieve what they want to achieve because they give up too early, right? Or it's too scary that they don't even try, and they miss out on that opportunity of becoming who they were really meant to be, right? It's in our choices, and in our choices we can create. And maybe, right, maybe he did save the life of somebody who had the idea of paying it forward a little bit by maybe become a surgeon himself, and or a scientist, or cure some terrible disease in life. And I think that, because of those choices that me and my sister made and he made, right? That we all get a piece of that, right? Yeah, I had that word community come up today, and for myself, I would have to say that's community, right? That's working together to create something good, to bring about kindness, to bring about change, to bring about opportunities, right? Lots of lessons in that experience. So I'm glad I asked my sister about it so that I can kind of share it with you guys too, right? Don't downsize how you impact, right, people, whether it's your sisters, your mother, your father, your next door neighbor, right? We all make a difference in each other's lives. 100%. 100%. Oh my goodness, I was just thinking of my sister Tracy. My sister had an episode this week. Her potassium shot up dangerously high, and yeah, so they gave her some antibiotics and stuff, and but she was in a very serious situation. And when I was talking to her yesterday about it, she said she had no idea that anything was going wrong. She said she felt fine, right? But her doctor said that she was in serious danger of having a really bad experience if she didn't go to the emergency room and get some infusions. And that's what she did. So yeah, we have to take care of ourselves, you guys. We really do. I'm gonna go in, and I'm going to get a checkup. I haven't had a checkup in a very long time. Very long time. I feel like I'm in good health. I think that, maybe the sometimes in the lack of energy, we don't pay attention, and sometimes it's just because we think we're 20 still. And then we think, well, what's wrong? What's wrong? But we're just naturally slowing down in that phase in our lives. For myself, I don't mind slowing down, but I don't slow down in what I can accomplish. I just slow down in the right. If it's mental stress, I'll just lessen that. If it's emotional stress, I'll lessen that. Right. If it's physical, then we lighten that load up too. Right. But we just switch it up by making small adjustments in our lives. Right. Understanding we're probably done with the 360s. Optimistically, Cindy says. Okay. Uh, oh, okay. No cold calling. Oh, good. Yeah, that I couldn't do a job cold calling. That would take me back to my childhood and probably trigger my traumas right off the hop. Right. I don't resolve all of it. Some of it, I just say, well, right. You resolve it by not putting yourself in those situations ever again. Right. But cold calling, no, it's not something that's in my makeup in any way, right? But again, just like that cup of coffee, right? If I had to go with that no name brand, if I had to, I would. right? If I don't have to, I won't. Okay. Um, my family had feed, soybeans, alfalfa, and one year we had wheat in one of the fields. The wheat was beautiful to see when the wind went through it. Oh, Andrew, I know exactly what you're talking about there. You know, when I go out for my country drives or when I was urban exploring out on the back roads and we just see these roaming hills and the wind is blowing and the wheat is just right? Going like this. It's just beautiful. It's stunning and it's peaceful. Um, I would love to look back in time and see the Anasazi people in the American West who built houses in the sides of the cliffs and had long straight roads that went to where seems to have been. You know what, Andrew? There are a couple. Desert Drifter, he passed away last year, but there are a couple of explorers who only explored those kind of communities, and they do it very considerately because lots of times people come into these settlements and they take the pottery or they go into the stores and they right or they do graffiti and take the relics and stuff, but these guys are really respectful and they use drones um, in their looking at the residences and stuff. So and they also use Google Maps. So they're just not in there trekking through everything. They're pinpointing where they want to explore, and then they go explore it, right? And there are a few of those explorers that I do watch. I don't know if you watch them too, Andrew, but they're very interesting. I wish I could remember the one that's current right now. There was Desert Drifter and well, if you Google Desert Drifter, you'll come into his videos, and then in his suggestions, you'll discover the other explorers' videos, and you'll find them absolutely fascinating. I find them fascinating. He's found so many. He has found oases in the deserts. He has found old corn plantations, like going back 900 years. He's discovered unopened stores meaning where they store the corn and stuff. They found complete villages, right, that are hidden amongst the rocks. The artwork, the petroglyphs. Oh, he loves the petroglyphs too. If you like that kind of stuff, you'll love his channel. But check them out. But those are fun explores. Ceremonial sites where the roads ran into the rocks, steps were carved into the rocks so as to keep the completely straight line. Yeah, yeah. Cindy, it sounds like you and Tracy were part of what would be called a chain of grace that helped the young man to become a surgeon. I believe you're right there, Andrew. We all play our roles, and lots of times we are puppets in that role, right? Sometimes we go about our whole life. Like I could have gone through my entire life, and that happened in my early 20s, and never ever have given that experience another thought, right? And in not giving it another thought, we could be in our deathbeds, we could be in our last days and not think that we ever made a difference in our lives and the entire world. We have no idea how we impact each other's lives, right? Even you guys, like hanging out with me, like you guys have kept me going on YouTube. Like if I came into Chatter's Live every Sunday and I just stood here and I just yapped by myself the entire hour and a half, and I did that for what, the 8 years that I said that I've been doing these live shows. Do you think maybe I would still be here? after all those years without having your company, right? I mean, it's possible, but probably not likely because it's in the company that we keep, right? It's keeping company with each other's lives and being able to get into these conversations with each other, right? It's not a matter of having to be the expert in something, but just having enough to get into the conversation, right? Right? Just to be able to come in and be kind, like when you guys have somebody new come into the chat and how you always just greet them right away and make them feel welcomed, right? And you've been doing that since the very beginning, ever since I started these live shows, and you didn't have to do that. But if you didn't do that for me and I wasn't paying attention, right? How would I know if I ever was seen or if I was ever heard by anybody? And probably I would notice that nobody was around. And how would that be the motivation or the inspiration to keep going? I inspire myself. I am my own cheerleader 100%. But you know what? It you guys have contributed so much in my brand and in me sticking with it. And you guys, you have no idea. Like, you're not even coming from the mindset, right? You came from the urban exploration, you came from the back road explorers, you came from those what was my bushcraft videos, what were they called? Oh my goodness. um Something Cindy. Oh my goodness. Surviving Cindy. That series, right? Right? And here you guys are in my mindset and you're still with me, right? And that shows that you guys actually care, right? And that's amazing. That's community. When we talk about community, that's community. You're my community, right? Right? And I'm part of your community. And that's the truth. We have just been together for just too darn long that it didn't matter if I stood upside down on my head, right? Up against a wall. You guys would probably just stick here with me because you're here for me. And I think that is absolutely amazing, right? And I would have to say if I ever made a difference down the road, anywheres down the road, just like, me and my sister helping Cam out, right? The way we did. And it just seemed like small things, such small things that it shouldn't even be something that we remember decades later, but we do, right? So we got to think, right? You guys did the same for me. So, of course, whatever I bring to the table, you guys are going to have to get a little bit of that credit for that too, right? Because you kept me here, right? And keeping me company, for being a part of my community and me yours, right? That's teamwork for sure. But that doesn't mean, right, that we're ever going to make that impact. It's not going to stop me from trying. It's not going to stop me from trying. And the reason it's not going to stop me from trying is because I got you guys, right? But you're right there, Andrew. I agree with you 100%. And I think we were pulled into that. We were directed to that. And sometimes, we can kind of think about it after the fact and think, oh, that was a kind of a crazy move, or what made me decide to do that, or why did I think that, or or why did I go there, right? And sometimes we don't need to know those answers in any way, but maybe, right? if we can every once in a while see the impact of those choices that we made and see the positive impact just as much as right, we could have made a different decision completely, and would we had to take responsibility for him never becoming a neurosurgeon? I don't think so, right? It's the extra we bring into the table, not the bare minimum or what we could have done, right? Yeah. Sometimes, what was that saying I hear all the time? Um, Got to be proud of the effort, if not the result, right? So it was in the heart, so it counts. Yeah, it counts. Okay, you guys, I am going to have another bowl of goulash that was supposed to be curried meatballs and it turned out to be something else. Doesn't look very appetizing, but it was pretty delicious, right? It was pretty delicious. I'm just going to have another bowl of that, then I'm going to sit down here. I'm going to Kodak the rest of that video so that it's ready tomorrow when I get up so I can just start getting into the editing, and hopefully that's not too much of a process, right? But I'm going to get it done. I've got Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning to get it finished. So I'm going to get to that. You guys, thank you so much, everybody, for popping into my live tonight. Don't forget to check out that YouTube channel, right? Jamestown Discovery. It was really good. And if you want to also check out Desert Drifter if you like those videos. Yeah, you'll enjoy those too. Everybody, have a great night. Thank you so much for your attention and your care. And yeah, I'll have maybe an announcement that I won't have to announce next week because you'll just see it in the way that I look. Okay, you guys, have a great night. I'll see you next Sunday.